So I finally came to the conclusion that there is no perfect argument. There is no 2 + 2 = 4 sort of argument where somebody has to believe. And I think that's to enable us to have free will.
Mm-hmm.
If there was this perfect argument, then where is the free will? You don't really have free will whether you want to believe 2 + 2 = 4 or not. I mean, you can choose not to believe it, I guess, but everyone's going to look at you like you're crazy.
Mm-hmm.
If people would ask me, why doesn't God just hang out in the sky and just, always be there? And then nobody would have to wonder. Nobody would have to seek. Nobody would have to not know. And again, I think it's because God wants us to come freely. So on the one hand, there's plenty of evidence that's out there for God's existence. Um, and, and God will make himself known to us in a way we can't deny if we seek him with all our heart, only wanting to know truth and don't give up. But at the same time, we can be atheists. We can be agnostic. We can be of a false religion. We can not care at all. We can just go our own way and throw the whole thing out and not worry about it. And there's lots of options that we have. And so it's up to us whether we want to seek out and find God or not.
Good evening, and welcome to another episode of the Willard Preacher Podcast. I'm Matt, a former Penn State student, and I am joined by Gary Cattell, as always. Gary is Penn State's Willard Preacher. How are you, Gary?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. So we're recording this on July 3rd, so the summer session will begin, I guess, next week. Is that correct?
Well, technically, summer session began on Wednesday, yesterday.
Okay.
But we only go out Mondays and Fridays.
Okay.
So since tomorrow's the 4th of July, they have off. So our first day will be Monday.
Okay. And how are you feeling about kind of getting back out there a little bit anyway?
Yeah, I think it'll be fun. Friday will be Arts Festival. So
Okay.
that's kind of a big day in State College.
Mm-hmm.
Just hope my voice holds out all right. It's been kind of
Uh-huh.
raspy since the spring. So
Okay.
don't want to go to the doctor because I'm afraid what he'll say. So
Yeah.
just hoping
Right.
it'll be all right.
Well, very good. I hope that goes well. And
Yeah.
in the meantime, we can record a little bit and have some conversations that are hopefully helpful to somebody out there. So you had mentioned, we're always kind of looking for different ideas for our conversations here. So you had mentioned that your wife um, had been in conversation with someone, and you can tell us more about this fella, but he was sort of initially, at least, asking for what's the perfect argument to convert his friend. So let's
Yeah. I
start
mean,
with that.
I don't know too much about either one of these, him or his friend.
Mm-hmm.
He was in contact with my wife, and he kept saying, "Well, what do I need to say? What do I need to say to convert him?" I know I looked for decades for the perfect argument. So
Mm-hmm.
I finally gave up and said, "Nope, it doesn't exist." I said, "Find something." It would seem to work, a couple of people would say, "Oh yeah, I get it." And then, eventually come to a person, they didn't buy it. They had some argument against it. They didn't see it, whatever. So I finally came to the conclusion that there is no perfect argument. There is no 2 + 2 = 4 sort of argument where somebody has to believe. And I think that's to enable us to have free will.
Mm-hmm.
If there was this perfect argument, then where is the free will? You don't really have free will whether you want to believe 2 + 2 = 4 or not. I mean, you can choose not to believe it, I guess, but everyone's going to look at you like you're crazy. If
Hmm.
people would ask me, why doesn't God just hang out in the sky and just, always be there? And then nobody would have to wonder. Nobody would have to seek. Nobody would have to not know. And again, I think it's because God wants us to come freely. So on the one hand, there's plenty of evidence that's out there for God's existence. Um, and and God will make himself known to us in a way we can't deny if we seek him with all our heart, only wanting to know truth and don't give up. But at the same time, we can be atheists, we can be agnostic, we can be of a false religion, we can not care at all, we can just go our own way and throw the whole thing out and not worry about it. And there's lots of options that we have, and so it's up to us whether we want to seek out and find God or not. And some people do, and I think many people these days don't.
Hmm.
I think many just. I think many who would say they believe in God don't really believe in God. But
Hmm.
then many who say they believe in God just kind of give an acknowledgement to God's existence. Yes, God is there, or He's my imaginary friend, or whatever. He's whatever they want to call him, but they don't really know who He is. Right? So the first step to believing in God after you know that He exists is to know who He is. If you don't know who He is, what are you believing in? Who are you believing in? It's a mute point. You might as well not believe in anything. So once you know who He is, then you have to know what He wants from us. Once you know what He wants from us, then you have to decide that you're going to do it for the rest of your life. Then you have to start doing it.
Hmm.
Then you can say you really believe. Now, Satan knows who God is. He knows that there's a God. He knows who He is. He knows what He wants from him. He just doesn't want to do it. And so He doesn't. We wouldn't say that Satan believes in any sense that's going, he just acknowledges God's existence. He doesn't believe in any sort of salvific way. Um, so anyhow, God wants us to have free will. He wants us to be able to come to Him freely. And so it takes some effort. It takes some time and effort. And but so there is no smoking gun. But you have to get to know the person. You have to talk with them. But you have to see where they're coming from. You have to try to answer their specific questions because everybody's different. And there may only be so many objections to God or to who God is or whatever. But you have to find out who is this person? What are they thinking? And this is what we kept trying to ask this person, well, what does this person believe? And what does the person you're talking to believe? What does he think? He said, well, he believes in God. He believes that Jesus is the Son of God. Okay, well, what does that mean? What do you mean by he believes? What do you mean the Son of God? Does that mean like all sons and daughters of God, or is Jesus different? And we never really got an answer because fortunately the guy was really seeking God and he actually got an answer from God himself before any of this, or really got some answers so that because we're trying to figure out, well, how do we answer this person? Well, we don't know because we don't know what he really thinks. So sometimes, there's, you'll find things out there. Well, this is what you have to do to convert somebody, and then they go, the 5-step process or whatever. And you ask them this, ask them that. Here's just say this, and you just say that, and that might work for some people. It's not going to work for everybody. And if you start getting canned answers, then people are going to know that. Well, this
Hmm.
person's just rehearsing things that he's heard before,
Yeah.
or he doesn't really care about me. He just cares about these arguments that he's making and how good they are, or whatever. So it's a personal thing, and you have to know. You have to answer the. You don't have to really get to know them that personally if you just met them or something. But you do have to know how they're thinking, what they're believing. So the best thing to start out with is questioning. What do you believe? Or where have you come from? What did you grow up with believing? And if you grew up believing in Christianity, why don't you believe now? And eventually you kind of get to that thing where you can say, okay, here's where I can enter in. Here's what I think this person needs. Even if you have that argument for that person, it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that he's going to accept it.
Hmm.
So ultimately we're all free. And ultimately we can believe or not believe. You can make the greatest argument right for that person needs, and they can still not believe because they don't want to believe.
Mm-hmm.
They want to do their own will. They want to go their own way, which is ultimately what it comes down to. I want to do my thing the way I want to do it, and I don't want God getting in the way. So no matter what you say, I'm going to argue against it. So you also have to be talking to somebody who really wants to know. You can see pretty quickly, does this person want to know or not? This person, and another thing, real quick here, when you're talking to somebody, and I made this mistake again for decades. I guess it was pride or whatever. I always thought if I give them this argument for the 37th time in the last hour, if I say the exact same thing, this time they'll get it, right? But it never worked that way. We both would just get frustrated with each other because we start saying the same thing, each of us saying the same thing over and over and over again. Each one of us, getting frustrated. The other person doesn't seem to know what we're saying, because if they did, they would understand it, they would believe it or whatever. So what I found to be most effective is if you get to the place in a discussion where you're just, you've said the same thing a few times, 2, 3 times, person's not getting it. It's best just to say, all right, well, let's take this up some other time.
Mm-hmm.
Let's move on to another subject. Before it breaks down and it just gets into a frustrated argument, because then that more often than not, that will just harden that person against the faith. So you want to kind of be aware of that and stop before it gets there. So anyhow, that's a lot of different things, but
Yeah. Now, I have a couple questions then. So in your experience, like uh, you said, it took you a long while to learn that aspect of let's just pause it right there and move on to something else rather than rehashing the same argument steps in, repeating them over and over again. Um, you know, at what point did you kind of come to that realization? And are you finding that to be more effective um, now that you're doing that, I guess?
yeah, that's a good question, because looking back on it, it didn't really seem to matter to previous generations. As we get into these knockdown, drag out arguments in front of Willard, they'd
Uh-huh.
be back the next day for more.
Uh-huh.
But Gen Z doesn't seem to be like that.
Okay.
You get into that little, what do you want to call it? It starts to get argumentative, and then you never see them again.
Okay.
So I don't know what that means. I don't know if they're not as tough or strong as previous generations were. They're just different. I don't know what it is. But I really started to see it with this particular generation because, you know, and I think becoming Orthodox helped with that, because I've got examples now of saints who, will say that will kind of say these things too. But really, Gen Z, they don't, at least in my experience at Penn State, they don't, if it gets contentious at all, they don't like that. They kind of run
Interesting.
from that.
Interesting.
I'm not really
Yeah.
sure why that is. Other generations, it wasn't like that. It's all right, you both go away, kind of frustrated or angry or whatever, and then a day or two later they're back and they're at it again. But so I never really thought that it really mattered before. Of course, again, I always thought if I said the same thing, they'd finally get it.
Yeah.
But now I realize for Gen Z it matters. They won't come back.
Yeah. And I mean, the other piece too, from my perspective, anyhow, having been someone, I never was in that spot where I was having the knockdown drag out argument with you. Um, I was more the observer, and I think there's something also to be said for, so you're going around and around, and if you hold fast in your argument and you keep bringing it back around, that might be beneficial to someone who's sort of peripherally listening, or who's sort of following the argument, um, and seeing what someone will do, and are they going to bring it back around. And um, I don't know, there's a certain drama to it all that was to me, very interesting, very entertaining, that I guess the younger generations, they don't find that kind of conflict interesting, or they find
Yeah,
it
and
scary
since
maybe.
we don't have people just hanging out at Willard anymore,
Mm-hmm.
we don't have people all over the steps, all day long.
Yep.
Then it's more just a one-on-one conversation. But before it was kind of, maybe that was a difference too. Before it was more of a public debate with an
Mm-hmm.
audience.
Yeah.
So there was a different, that's kind of a different genre of things.
Hmm.
And so maybe and you're right, and you are kind of, yeah, you're arguing with this person or debating this person, but you're also aware that there's other people around listening.
Yeah.
Of course, so, and that can go either way. You could keep coming around, and more people could keep coming in, and they could hear the argument, or people would be there because might think, oh, we've heard this for half an hour now. Let's go on to something else.
Hmm.
So you have to kind of know your situation and kind of, and it doesn't, you don't have to go out and do anything perfectly.
Yeah.
God doesn't expect perfection from us, fortunately. But it's just some things that I've kind of picked up. Know the situation, know who you're debating, know who's around listening, and just kind of don't go too far with it, but go far enough so that people understand what's being said. They can have a clear delineation between this person's argument and your argument,
Hmm.
and hopefully, they'll be able to see truth to that. But again, what always enters in there is whether a person wants to know the truth.
Right.
If somebody doesn't want to know that 2 + 2 = 4, there's nothing you can do. You can give them whatever mathematical proofs are out there. You can get 4 sticks and say, here's two and here's two and equals 4. It doesn't matter. They aren't going to believe. The people that have a good disposition, that they want to understand, they want to know, then I think there's a place for, even though um, arguments like this aren't really meant to convert somebody because God has to do that.
Hmm.
One of the things they'll do is they'll give people the understanding that yes, Christianity can be defended, because I've run into a lot of people over the years who just didn't think it could be defended.
Hmm.
Maybe they wowed their buddies in high school with their atheistic arguments,
Yeah.
or they went to their priest and to their parents and to their pastor and whatever, and they couldn't answer their questions. So they just figured out Christianity doesn't have answers. So that's another thing, just to put these things out there so people realize this can be defended. Probably not going to convert them unless, of course, God could use it. He could use it and say, yes, this is truth, and that person could believe at that point. But at the very, very least, you want to show them that, hey, there are answers to these things, and this faith can be defended.
Hmm. Now, another question that I was going to ask is the fella who was, uh, we might want to give them names or something. The fella who was asking the question initially, what can I do to make this perfect argument? What was his faith background? Obviously, he's a Christian. Was he an Orthodox
Yeah.
person, or what
No,
was his faith
unfortunately, we didn't
background?
get that far with them because we're going through an intermediary,
Okay.
and we were just kind of starting to get there when the guy came to believe, so we didn't really have to do that. But that's an important thing too. Where are they coming from? You
Hmm.
know, what did they learn growing up? Somebody like me, I didn't learn anything growing up. And it still baffles me. I was thinking about this the other day. I don't know if I said this on this podcast or not. But, it would be around Christmas time, and I'd watch, the Charlie Brown Christmas, which is an anti-materialistic,
Hmm.
they actually quote,
Actually,
Luke,
pretty nice. Yeah.
the Gospel of Luke,
Hmm.
and never dawned on me what it was about. Or we at that time we would have these, and I was in elementary school, we put on these little pageants in school, and parents would come and watch, and kind of recounting the Christmas story. And again, nothing, never didn't dawn on me what was being said. I look back on it and say, how's that possible? And how can I hear these Christmas carols, Western Christmas carols that are basically saying, Jesus, the Son of God, came to earth and was born as a man and so on, and just not doesn't even didn't even register anything. So that's possible too. Somebody could come from great darkness and just not have any background as to what it's all about. And then again, you have to question them. Listen, where are you coming from? What faith background, if any, did you come from? And most people, most Gen Z really didn't come from any.
Hmm.
And if they did, then it was very, well, yeah, my parents took me to church, or I went until I was 10, or my parents split up, and then, or they got angry with the pastor or something. So it's rare to really run into somebody who really has had a good background in the faith growing up. Again, when I taught Sunday school, that's what I was trying to do with the high school kids, just say, hey, this is how, not just what we believe, but why we believe it. So when they went out into college, and this is, I think, because I saw this time and time and time again. Well, yeah, I grew up, Christian, some sort of Christian, but all we learned was Noah's Ark and
Mm-hmm.
animals going into Noah's Ark, and that was it. And of course, kids, are shuffled away during the sermon or whatever, so they don't bother their parents, the adults, and so they never really learn anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so then they get to college or out with their friends or whatever, and they have some arguments, from Dawkins or Hitchens or one of these, atheist types, or from another religion or whatever, and they just don't know how to answer it because they never had to answer it. They never had to answer it, they never learned.
Yeah.
So, and they were never challenged. That's another thing we try to do in Sunday schools, challenge them. Try to get them to say, well, how would you defend this? A lot of times, they didn't really know. They knew it was true, but they didn't know how to defend it because they never had to.
Mm-hmm.
You grow up in a Christian family and you go to church, and maybe you don't have any atheistic friends or friends from another religion or whatever. And never comes up. These days it probably never comes up. So you never really have to defend it. So you never really have to maybe not even know what the right questions are, much less the right answers. So I think it's good for parents to challenge their kids, and and that's why we kind of mentioned the book that I wrote, Christian versus the University, because it runs through these arguments in a very simple way. Parents can read it, give it to their kids to read, and then they can discuss it. Or the kids come up with a question and maybe it's answered there. If not, go find the answer. Somebody's got to know. These days, being online, you've got to be able to find answers to these questions online somewhere. But you don't have to know all the answers, but you have to say to your kid, "Well, I don't know that, but I'll find out for you,"
Mm-hmm.
and make an effort to find out. Just don't forget about it, because they probably won't forget about it. And if you don't come back with an answer, they may not bug you about it, but they may just think, "Well, I guess there wasn't an answer." And you don't want them thinking that way, right? You want them to even if they, whenever I was looking into Orthodoxy and I went to lunch with Father John and Father Peter Gilquist, and I was going down there as a Protestant, and they were obviously Orthodox priests. And I thought, well, I don't have to agree with them, but I want to see if they have answers. Because up until that time, that was 1996, 97, I guess, spring of 97, maybe. Anyhow, um, I had never found, that was the first time I found, and I started in 82, a Roman Catholic that could defend their faith. Since I never found a Roman Catholic that could defend their faith, I thought, well, Roman Catholicism isn't worth my time. It can't be defended. And this guy could defend it, and so I had to take it seriously. When Father John and Father Peter and Jimmy, the guy who was evangelizing me, could defend it, I thought, well, I have to look into this now. So even if your kids don't necessarily believe it, if they know it can be defended, that's half the battle. Because at
Mm-hmm.
some point, hopefully, they'll say, well, I should look into this. My parents, my priest, my pastor, my friend, whatever, had good answers to these questions, even though I didn't believe. Maybe I should look into it. So you don't have to have all the answers, but you should find the answer. If not from clergy or a friend, at least online. There's plenty of places online where people are doing apologetics.
Mm-hmm.
We have plenty of podcasts here where we go through all sorts of things, and we have playlists, and you can go through those and you can find probably a lot of these answers. And if you can't find them, you can email us or whatever. I guess you have an email up there, and we'll try to get back to you. If we don't, just email it again.
Yep.
That's just because we didn't see it.
Yeah, definitely. Now the first guy who was asking, we're you were just discussing the guy who I guess recently converted or became a Christian, I guess. What his background was like or how you would approach that. But the guy who was asking your wife initially, what's the perfect argument that I can convert this fellow with? Was he Orthodox as well?
No, no, he was some manner of Protestant,
Okay.
and I don't really know him too well.
Uh-huh.
My wife knows him, but I don't know what manner of Protestant he is.
Okay. Because it's the reason why I'm asking is um like I can remember and I can remember encountering, different flavors of Christian who would ask those kinds of things or who would try to structure an argument in a certain way, and you could tell that it was pretty well maybe rehearsed, or it was a certain order to things to try to make like this bulletproof argument. Um, and I think it is, you've talked about this already, but I do think it's kind of worth emphasizing that within the context of orthodoxy, it just doesn't quite fit, because we are talking about a real living relationship with the real living God. And so God's going to act how he's going to act. He's free to act. And the person who wants to know God more or less, um, that person is free to act as well. And yeah, there's a lot of things. There's different things that will be the right thing that that person needs to hear at just the right time, perhaps, because God's working in their life and knowing, drawing certain things to their attention and so on. So I like what you were saying about it. It can't possibly be formulaic. I mean, there are certain things you can lay out there over the years, um, and there are, we've talked about sort of what are some good arguments for the existence of God, for example. Um, but in terms of like really truly confirming that God is there and who he is, that's ultimately, as we've talked about so much here, ultimately that has to be something that, God is acting to reveal himself to somebody. Um, and so yeah, it kind of hits the like a false note when we say, what's the perfect argument to make this person a Christian? Well, we're not machines. That kind of belongs to, maybe like a scholastic theological approach where like if you can just prove God's existence in this perfect philosophical proof, then someone is like more or less compelled to know and believe that. Um, God doesn't overpower our will, and we shouldn't try to do that either, ultimately.
Yeah, and people know, I think, if you're pressing too hard,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you're trying to get them to believe. And most will kind of back off.
Mm-hmm.
And even if they may even have a tendency to believe what you're saying, they may still fight against it because we're free beings, like you said, and we know that, and we want to be free. We want to be able to make our own decision. So if you put these things forth without coming across as if you need to believe right now,
Mm-hmm.
you're kind of planting seeds. I was talking to a friend of mine not long ago, and he was actually doing a paper on street preaching, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I was saying, look, for street preaching, at least from my perspective and my experience, is mostly a sowing ministry. There is some reaping going on. It's mostly the sowing ministry. It's mostly a lot of times it's the first time somebody will actually hear, these days, the Christian gospel or whatever. So, you're putting these arguments forth, and we want to have the attitude of, I'm putting this forth. It's up to God to use them the way He will, and then you won't come off as trying to force them to believe.
Mm-hmm.
And you shouldn't try to. Well, I mean, obviously, you want to convert them right then. You want everybody to convert right then.
Sure.
But if that's at the forefront of your mind, again, they're going to think that you're trying to force them. I mean, and most people, if you try to force them, they'll either say yes in order to get you to back off. Okay, yeah, yeah, I believe. Now go away.
Mm-hmm.
Or they'll just continue to argue with you even if they believe what you say, or it'll just it'll just become contentious because people know that they're free and they know that they need to be free, and they know that they can't be forced to believe something. And if you are forced to believe something, then you don't really believe it.
Mm-hmm.
You really do have to come to it freely. So see it as you're sowing the seed, you're throwing the net into the sea, you're throwing the bait into the sea or whatever, and there's fish in the sea, and you've thrown the bait in. That's your job, and now it's God's job to bring the fish to eat it, And it's God's job to say, yes, this is good food. And it's God's job to say, yes, this is true. And that's what this guy, I'm hesitant to say names because I don't
Sure.
want to put stuff out there. That's what this guy ultimately, we had said, what does he mean by the Son of God? Next thing we hear is, oh, he believes.
Mm-hmm.
So he didn't even need all of that. But he really wanted to know. His thing was, why do I exist? What's the purpose of life?
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, the answer to that is, well, if there's a God, then he's the answer to life. And if there is no God, then there is no reason for your existence. It's just that's, and when I was an unbeliever, and I mean, even my dense darkness, I figured that out. If there's no God, there's no meaning.
Mm-hmm.
And even though I was willing to go there, if it was true, it didn't sit well. The reason it didn't sit well is because we are created beings and we do know that life has meaning. Atheists will tell me, well, I don't believe that life has any objective meaning, but I give myself my own subjective meaning. Why? If this really is a godless universe and there's no meaning to any of it, that means there's no meaning to us in our lives. That means that's the natural way of being. So why should we fight against it? Why can't we just be happy with that? But when even atheists will give themselves a reason to, because I mean, how else do you get along in life?
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's no meaning to anything I'm doing today or any day. So meaningless life, meaningless world, meaningless universe, meaningless existence, meaningless death. I mean, how do you even get up in the morning? So that's for me a strong evidence that there is meaning to life. And if there is a meaning to life, it has to come from God because you can't have meaning unless you're created by an intelligent being. Because that intelligent being can say, okay, I'm going to create these humans for a purpose, and this is the purpose. But if we're just, you know, coming into existence because stuff happens, then there's no meaning to that. There's no intellect to give it meaning. It's just stuff happening. So, but I found that most, even in Gen Z, they talk about Gen D doesn't believe in God. Well, most of them really do, at least the ones I talk to.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have any particular religion that they believe in. They believe in some sort of higher power, which is virtually a meaningless belief. But I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
a quite meaningless. It's better than being atheist, but not much. In fact, it can sometimes be worse than being atheist because you can deceive yourself into thinking that, oh, I believe in a higher power, so everything's okay. So you're just kind of deceiving yourself on the way to hell, right? Because you're thinking, well, I'm gonna get to the judgment. I'm gonna say, well, I believed. As we said before, you don't really believe because you don't know who the God is. You don't know what he wants you're not doing it. You don't really believe in any sort of real way. You're acknowledging that there's a God out there, but that's it. And again, that's not good enough. So you know, so yeah.
Yep. Well, very good. I'm glad that. Anyway, it's such an interesting question about, what can we put forth in order to help people to convert. For my part, that we've talked about now for a few minutes, that place of freedom is so important. And um, my first encounter with your ministry actually was on the you know tour of the campus, and there wasn't any question that you were serious about what you were doing, what you were saying. And then fortunately, I came across you again that fall of my freshman year in 1996. Um, so obviously, you were making certain arguments, and it was very interesting and it was entertaining for sure. Sort of this debate kind of arena that was taking place. But before very long at all, what was so compelling was what you were saying, which was, um, if don't believe it because of what I'm saying, believe it because you've sought out God and God has somehow communicated to you. And that really, that talk in a certain sense, that's like the ultimate soft sell. It's putting it really is, it's putting it in the hands of the person seeking, and ultimately in the hands of God as far as, that knowledge. Um, and so when I was then seeking, I would say for, it took me a little while to actually figure out sort of the commitment to it and the regularity of it. But once I started kind of seeking, as you had described, which was, to spend some time each day saying, God, if you're there, make it clear to me in a way that I can understand and know for sure. Just a little bit of time each day. Once I would do that each day, at some point, several months later, I was uh, at the Orthodox parish there in town, and Father John Reeves, of blessed memory, the priest there, I was kind of hanging out, and somebody came by and he said, "Oh, this is Matt. He's seeking." And it was it was like he had no pressure about it. He wasn't trying to like lock it down, he wasn't trying to make the perfect argument. He wasn't trying to make the argument for orthodoxy. He wasn't trying to, he just trusted that God had it in, in his hand. And so, hey, this is Matt. He's seeking. Like, oh, great. Hey, how you doing? And that was kind of, so that was such a nice thing. And it really expresses so much about our faith that, if the people within it are understanding that God is the one that is going to order these things, then we're in really good shape.
Yeah, I remember Father John saying to me, "Well, the Orthodox Church has been here for 2,000 years. It can wait a little longer for you."
Uh-huh.
You know, so there was really no hurry about it. There was no pressure.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't want to believe, all right, well, you don't have to believe. And it's not like we don't care. It's just that we understand that again, you can't force that.
Yeah.
As people have to be able to come freely. Um, so, that was, and I've told this story before, but whenever we started going to the Orthodox Church and going to inquirers classes before you did, but then you went and you came back like the next day saying, "Oh, I'm a catechumen." And I remember thinking, "How did you do that? Did you become a catechumen? We've been going for months. I don't know how long it had been, maybe a year. I don't know. It's been a while." And you go like seemingly overnight and you become a catechumen. So how did you do that? Well, ask Father John. So I'm here waiting for Father John to say that we're ready. He's just waiting for us to say that we want to become Orthodox.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I guess that just shows that there really is no pressure in Orthodoxy. And
Mm-hmm.
so there shouldn't be any
Yeah.
pressure in our evangelism.
Yeah. That's right.
Here's the answer. Do with it what you want. It's not like sometimes I come across as if we don't care. We do care, and when we pray for people. But again, it's not going to be forced. It's going to be, here it is. Do you want it or don't you want it?
Mm-hmm.
But you have to decide that. You came in through the door, you can go out through the door. We want you to stay. We want you to believe. We want you to become an Orthodox Christian. But it's totally up to you. And you have to make that decision. And I think sometimes in the evangelism world, it can be a notch in the belt. I got so many people saved today, or
Mm-hmm.
for some, I had this big crowd I preached to all day long, and
Yeah.
and that's all nice and everything. That shouldn't be what it's all about. Yeah, it should be about people's salvation,
Mm-hmm.
but it shouldn't be. I have to get somebody saved so I can tell people, look what I did,
Mm-hmm.
which is a great temptation when you're doing evangelism, because you want to be able to see success and you want people to know that, hey, you're successful what you do. Same in any job, I guess you want that to be, but in evangelism, just in the Orthodox sense, and really in any sense, it just doesn't come off right.
Mm-hmm.
Again, you're going to come off as somebody who wants a notch in their belt,
Yeah.
and it's just going to be a matter of pride, and God can still use it, but again, it's just not the best way of doing it.
Yeah.
No.
Definitely. And you've had many years to learn all of that, and
Many years, many mistakes. No, that's the other thing. Don't worry if you make a mistake.
mm-hmm.
I mean, try to learn from it.
Yep.
If you did, get too intense or too argumentative or whatever, all right, repent,
Hmm.
you know, go to confession if you're Orthodox, but don't stop because you made a mistake. You always can be making mistakes. You want to learn from those mistakes, have it become part of your coming back to God and coming back into the image and likeness of God. And that's how you learn. One of the things Father John always used to say to me is, you're out there and you're gonna benefit more than anybody else. And I didn't understand that for a long time, but looking back on it, I can see that you go out there, you put under pressure. Maybe somebody curses you out, or somebody throws a snowball at you, or something, whatever, and pushes you or knocks you down, or whatever it is. And then internally, you have to deal with that.
Hmm.
How do you deal with it? Remember when I first started, and I was brand new Protestant Christian, first started preaching, and was walking down the street, just kind of minding my own business. Somebody walked by and said, "If I had a brick, I'd throw it at you." I'd I'd never I'd never had to deal with any of that before. I was able to get along with people and so on.
Hmm.
All of a sudden, there's people out there that want to hurt me or hate me or whatever. And it took a long time and a lot of mistakes and a lot of missteps and so on to be able to deal with that. But God was patient. And I look back and see how patient that God was with me. And some of the things that I said and some of the things I believed and some of the things I did and some of the attitudes I had and so on. You know, the pride and and whatever, and the anger and so on. But God hung in there with me. He didn't kill me, didn't shut me down. He used whatever he could, and slowly but surely, whenever he was able, enlightened me a little further, so I could say, "Oh, I guess I shouldn't do that anymore." Oh, I guess that was the big one. Of course, was becoming Orthodox. A lot of
Hmm.
little steps, and so lots of times I would walk away and either think, "Well, I didn't answer that question very well," or that was a bad attitude I had, or I got kind of frustrated with that person, said something I shouldn't have said. And whether you can apologize to that person or not, because you may never see them again, you learn from that, and you realize, oh, I guess there are still problems within me.
Hmm.
This, things still need to be cleaned up. Good thing God is patient and kind and merciful. So he wasn't out of in history long ago. So it teaches you a lot being out there, just like anywhere you are in life. God is going to put somebody in your path that's going to be the thorn in your flesh. And if you leave that job or leave that situation or whatever, get away from that, it's going to be somebody else, because that person is what you need to see that thing in you that still isn't good. And once you take care of that, which could take a long time, there's always going to be something else behind that, or maybe two or three things or whatever. God is always going to bring people and situations into our life that are going to expose that in us. And we don't like it. We want to get away from it. We complain about it. Maybe we switch jobs or switch neighborhoods or switch whatever, just to get away from whatever it is that was switch, whatever it is, get away from it. And God's saying, no, I want you to stay in it, because this is what's teaching you. And if you do try to if you do get out of it, I'm just going to bring somebody else to you that are going to do the same thing, because this is something in you that needs to be cleaned up. Because we were created in the image and likeness of God. We fell. The image of God got tainted in us. The likeness of God is no longer available. We were baptized, ideally into the Orthodox. Well, if we're baptized into the Orthodox Church, the image is cleaned up, and the way to become like God is opened up again. But that's a long, hard slog, and for most people, it's a lifetime slog. But it's one thing at a time, or it's maybe two or three things at a time. Some of these things take a long time because they're so deeply ingrained. And even though we see that they're wrong, we try to get away from it. Part of us still likes it, so we keep it around. And the devil knows, the little demon that's assigned to us or whatever. He knows what our shortcomings are. He knows how to get us. He knows how to trip us up. But it's all for our good if we keep our faith in God, if we keep our faith in the God-man Jesus, and if we continue to seek to become like God, God will hang in there with us, And it's not that God would ever leave us. God's nature is pretty stable. He's not fluctuating at all. So he is forgiveness. He is love. He is goodness. He is patience. He can't be impatient. He can't not love. We can. So really, the ball's in our court. God is always going to be there. Question is, are we always going to be there? He's always going to be reaching out to us. He's always going to love us, but are we going to reach out to him and try to love him? And most of us don't really love God. We think we love God, or we want to love God, or we claim to love God. Really, for most of us, we love ourselves. We love God somewhat, but we really love ourselves. And that's a tough transition to make. As it's not made in a day or a year or 10 years or sometimes 20 or 30 years. Or, most of us, it's a lifetime. But as you do it, if you're serious about it, you do make progress. And you do slowly but surely go down that road towards the likeness of God. And that's the road we need to be on, if in the end we're going to be with God. Because if we're on that road for a while, we turn back. Well, in the end, if we have our back turned to God, then what's that say? It says we don't really want God. We wanted him for a while. There is no eternal security out there. We have to always, God will always be with us. He will always seek to bring us to himself. He will never give up on us, but we can give up on God. And if you feel yourself giving up on God, number one, if you have given up on God and you want to come back, God is forgiveness. He's not going to stay there and say, I'm not going to forgive you, right? If we have true repentance, if we really want to come back, it's going to allow us to come back because that's who he is. It's not just going to allow us to come back. He's going to be like the son, the father of the prodigal son. He's going to run to us and, do whatever the prodigal father, not the prodigal, or the father did the prodigal son, kiss him on the cheek or whatever, put his robe on him, put his ring on him. But we still have to then deal with all the garbage that we've created within ourselves. Mm-hmm. And that's where all the problem is. The problem is never with God. The problem is always with us. But that's the hardest thing we have to come to. I'm the problem. I'm the screw up. I'm the mess that I made. Nobody else made this mess that I am. I made the mess that I am. And that's so hard for all of us to deal with because it goes against our fallen pride. Our fallen nature is tough. It's pretty rancid. Mm-hmm. But we sugarcoat it and we put nice dress on it, put the lipstick on the pig, and it doesn't look so bad. But really it is that bad. But it's hard for us to come to that conclusion. It takes a long time and a lot of effort because we don't want to see it. So we are supposed to be like God, and internally we know that we are supposed to be good, and internally we know that. But so it's hard to think, well, the only way I can become good, the only way I can come into the likeness of God is to see how wretched I am. That doesn't seem like the right way. It seems like the right way should just be to ignore the wretch that I am and just kind of pretend to be good. Mm-hmm. We wouldn't see it as pretending. We pretend to be good. And we see ourselves as good. We come off as good. And because it's always easy to do that in public with strangers. It's more difficult to do that, in your home or with people who are close to you or whatever. But anyhow, that's the goal. And as much as we can, we need to pray that God will show us our sinfulness so we can get rid of it, can get it taken care of. The saints tell us is that person who is our adversary is really our benefactor. He's the one that's showing us what we need to do to get rid of. He's the one that's showing us our filth or whatever, whatever it is, our sin. He's the one that's showing it to us, he or she. And so instead of what we do is we want to get rid of the one that's causing our problem. And God is saying, no, he's not the cause of the problem. You're the cause of your problem. He's showing you your problem. You should be thanking him. Mm-hmm. That's the last thing we want to do is be thanking this person for showing us our problem. We just want to get rid of, he's the problem. We want to get rid of him. So anyhow, that's kind of, I don't know, that's perfect rendering of things, but that's it's kind of it's a tough road, but it's not something that God will allow to overwhelm us. He'll give us what we need. He won't allow us to be overwhelmed if we continue on the path. And what I have found in the Orthodox Church is confession is so important because it's not just between confession and communion. It's not just getting something checked off a list somewhere, a Santa Claus list of being naughty or something. It's, yeah, you're confessing it, but you're confessing it in order to be healed from it, not just to confess it.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, we don't realize that, well, okay, I did this, I need to get it taken care of. God will forgive me, which means he's gonna erase that blight on my record. And he does do that. What he wants to do between that and taking communion and everything else that the church has to offer is to heal us. It's the whole aspect of Orthodoxy is to be healed. We didn't cause the problem. Now they need to cause the problem. We've contributed to it. And we are the problem now. They're not. And so, and God wants to heal us. And that's what the church is there for, is to heal us. And you can't really, it's difficult. I mean, we still do it because who we are. It's difficult to say to think of somebody at church, oh, that's such a terrible person, when you're going to confession also. Now we do it and we say, oh, they're probably worse than I am or whatever. We still do it, but it's more difficult than when you never see anybody going to confession. You only see them at church, especially now as Protestant. You only see them at church and everybody's got the best face on at church. Everybody's always happy. Everything's always going great. After a while, you realize, nah, that's not the way it is. That doesn't work. That's not the way life is. But so in Orthodoxy, it's difficult to keep that. I mean, we still do it, but it's more difficult because people see you going to confession.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you say? Well, I'm sinless. I've never done anything wrong. I just saw you going to confession last week. What do you mean you didn't do anything wrong? If you're taking communion, you had to have gone to confession within the last whatever your church says, a month, 4 times a year, whatever it is, you're going to confession. And so you can't stay up there as Mr. Holy and look down on everybody else. We do it, but it's more difficult because of seeing everybody sitting there in line, and you're sitting in line too. You're going up just like everybody else is. So
Well, thank you, Gary. That was great, and that was really helpful to me to hear all of that. It's an interesting thing that we do find in Orthodoxy because, just like you said, it's not just that we're having these things wiped off a list, right? Or that holiness is imputed on us, right? We're still like this bags. We're still these bags of garbage, but then Christ kind of lays like a white cloth over top of us, um, it's not like that. We uh, God's desire is actually to heal us and to purify us. And like you said, it's a lifetime process, and for most of us, and it can be quite messy and confusing and humbling, and all. But that's such a helpful word that this idea of the person that we see as our enemy or that is causing us the trouble is actually the one that is doing us the most benefit, so that we can see ourselves and be healed as a result. So that's lovely. Thank you.
yeah, when you're in the midst of it, it's hard
Yeah.
to say, oh, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Thank you for cursing me out. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
But hopefully looking back on at least, we'll see that, yeah, that was good. I remember when I was Protestant, going on what something you said, and one Protestant theology is, God, we're not righteous, but God sees us as righteous. And even when I was Protestant, I used to think, what, God's lying to himself?
Mm-hmm.
He's kidding himself. He's not seeing things the way they are.
Yeah.
They never sat well with me, even as a Protestant, because I thought, no, God is truth. He's seeing me exactly the way I am. He's not sugarcoating it.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't really understand the process of becoming like God back then. I did realize that, no, God isn't just throwing this white sheet over this blackened soul. He's taking that blackened soul and he's trying to clean it up the best he can.
Mm-hmm.
And we keep blackening it up, and he keeps trying to clean it up. But he's not seeing us in any other way other than we are, which really shows his mercy and his goodness. Because if he's pretending we're something we're not, then is he really that merciful? He's just deceiving himself at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, but just to repeat myself again, I guess that's kind of redundant, repeating myself again. But God is mercy. God is goodness. God is forgiveness. He can't be anything else. He can't not forgive. So again, the ball's always in our court. Do we want to forgive him? And I've heard some people say, well, I'm too sinful for God to forgive me. No, you're too prideful.
Mm-hmm.
If you think you're so sinful, God can't forgive you,
Mm-hmm.
then you're putting yourself above God, and that's probably your problem.
Yeah.
But the God who is forgiveness can't forgive you. Why does that make any sense? So yes, we can always be forgiven. We can always be healed. We just have to want it.
Absolutely. Well, that seems like a good place to stop the conversation. But that was really great and really helpful, and I look forward to putting that out there. I think probably the stuff at the towards the end, especially, is that's so nice. I think I'd like to put that maybe even at the beginning as that intro. So, but thanks for spending some time talking about these things, Gary. Um, it's good to kind of get back to it a little bit. Um, it's it's a summertime, so it's not super late in State College, but I will say, Christ is risen.
It's still there, so it's just not quite as dark.
Okay.
Indeed, he is risen.
All right. Have a good night.
Yeah, me too.